So, Pokémon Sapphire. I recently did a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Fire Red, and with how well that went...
Oh, Alright, shit. Man, I love Double Team. I use Sleep Powder. It misses. And then it misses again. And then it roars. Just a bunch of fucking terrible luck.
I decided it would be a great idea to do the same thing again, in a different game. One that I was far less familiar with. I have played through Hoenn before, but whenever I did, it was always in Pokémon Emerald, not Sapphire. And even then, I didn't play it nearly as much as Leaf Green. One immediate thing to be noted about all of the Hoenn games is that they are considerably harder than the Kanto games. Opposing trainers tend to have better constructed teams, better individual Pokémon on those teams, and seem to have better AI as well. Most of the boss battles in Kanto could easily be swept with a single half-decent Pokémon, but most Hoenn bosses have at least one or two, if not more Pokémon, that throw a wrench in that idea. And even the ones that you can sweep usually require a bit more effort to pull it off. I am definitely expecting a bit more trouble this time. The rules are the same as last time. Set mode, dupes clause, no bag items in battle, no overleveling, etc. If you want to hear about them in more detail, go watch my Fire Red video. The only thing I'm going to add this time is some personal rules preventing me from using legendary Pokémon or the moves Double Team and Minimize. One more thing to note is that in this gameplay footage, you may notice that I have a seemingly endless amount of rare candies. Grinding for levels is tedious and generally just not fun, so it's a pretty commonly accepted practice in the Nuzlocke community to simply mod in a bunch of rare candies so the player doesn't have to bother with it. This does mean that this time around, I have absolutely no excuse to lose Pokémon for stupid reasons like getting impatient while trying to level them up or entering a fight unprepared. So, that means that it doesn't happen. Right? I load up a new game, have some trouble with the clock.
How do I change if it's AM or PM? Oh my god.
Find Professor Birch getting attacked by a Poochyena, and I'm given my choice of starters, Treecko, Torchic, and Mudkip. Just like last time, I run my RNG to pick my starter, and I get Treecko, which I would say is probably the middle of the three in terms of usefulness. With me expecting a bit more trouble in this game, I actually decided to start looking at the IVs of some of the Pokémon I obtained. Unfortunately, Juniper the Treecko's special attack IV was pretty bad. IVs aren't going to make a huge difference early on, but they're going to matter a lot more as I progress further into the game, and eventually they do begin to influence my game plan. I decide to overlevel a bit just to weigh the usually pretty luck-based first battle against the rival pretty heavily in my favor, and I begin catching my early game encounters. The early game Pokémon of Hoenn seem to be designed almost in direct response to criticism of the pretty lackluster early game encounters of the first two generations. Because in these games, not only is there more variety, some of them are actually really good. Like, forget possibly being helpful for the early game, maybe some of the mid-game, many of the early encounters you can find in the Hoenn games evolve into solid candidates for an Elite Four team. For a while I try to run with a theme of naming them after animated characters. Sometimes I have an easy one to go with, but sometimes I have to dig so deep to find one that fits, that I wind up resorting to what I'm pretty sure are fanon names. And you'll see later that I eventually just completely give up on that idea. I progress through the game a little more, have a couple of really annoying battles in Petalburg Woods, including an optional bug catcher who has a full team of Wurmples, who I only ran into because I got stopped in my tracks by a wild encounter and then he turned before I had a chance to move.
Would've gotten past it. He has 6 Pokemon?! Are you serious?
And the Team Aqua Grunt with a Poochyena that loves spamming Howl and Sand Attack. Eventually, however, I make my way to Rustboro City and proceed to challenge the first gym leader. Roxanne isn't amazingly difficult, but I wouldn't say she's completely free like Brock was in Fire Red. Well, okay, her Geodude is free, but her Nose Pass isn't crippled by a 4x weakness the same way Geodude or Onix are, and it actually has a pretty decent special defense stat, so you're pretty unlikely to one-shot it. Any one of the grass types that you can get at this point in the game should still cut it, but an unlucky crit could cause this battle to go pretty badly, and I end up having to switch to avoid that risk. It continues to be a little annoying with Roxanne repeatedly healing it, but it isn't able to put a dent in Toadette the Shroomish, and we get our first badge. After leaving the gym, I head out to Route 116, and I get possibly the most important encounter in the game, Tailo. When I said the early game Pokemon of Hoenn are actually surprisingly good, I was mainly talking about the other ones besides Tailo, because for Tailo, that is an understatement. This Pokemon and its evolved form Swellow are outright busted. So what makes it so good? Obviously its speed is really high, but its attack doesn't look like anything special. 2 words. Guts, Facade. Guts is one of the best abilities in the game, doubling a Pokemon's attack stat if it's burned, paralyzed, or poisoned, and Facade is a 70 base power normal type move whose power is doubled if the user is burned, paralyzed, or poisoned. This is a ridiculously powerful combination that Swellow makes even better use of than most other Guts Pokemon because of its high speed and its normal type, giving Facade another 50% boost in power. This is a key member of any team in the Hoenn region. The one problem is actually catching it. Even without the Guts boost, its attack is pretty dangerous this early in the game.
Oh geez, yeah, I gotta switch.
While preparing for the next gym leader, Brawly, I start to notice what may continue to be a problem in this game. What I plan to do is get Margaret the Tailo poisoned on purpose so I can use the Guts ability to make Brawly easier. However, while doing this, I need to continuously heal her with potions to make sure she doesn't faint from the poison damage. Deaths outside of battle count in a Nuzlocke if that somehow wasn't clear to anyone. Unfortunately, I can't afford to buy too many potions because in Ruby and Sapphire, money can be really tight. And getting all the way to Dewford only to realize that I'm low on potions and that there's no Pokemart in that town definitely doesn't help with that. I don't know if this fully explains it, but one potential reason is how most trainer battles in this game are skippable. We're getting to the second gym. You want to know how many mandatory battles there have been in the entire game so far? 6, including the tutorial battle against the Poochyena. I believe there are only around 50 in the entire game, and this includes both rivals, the villain, the gym leaders, the Elite Four, and the champion. And with the combination of the rare candies and the fact that I just don't want to risk unnecessary deaths, I don't have much incentive to do the optional battles. I could sell my rare candies for free money, but that seems a bit too cheatsy. When I finally get to Brawly, he's hardly even worth talking about. He can be a little annoying if you don't have a Tailo. Bulk Up is a pretty powerful move to see this early on, but I do have a Tailo, so he's basically free. After wiping the floor with him, I deliver the letter to Steven in Granite Cave.
How Steel Wing could be anybody's favorite move is beyond me. 70 power and doesn't even have 100% accuracy. That is garbage.
Catch a Magikarp, which I name Haku, and begin heading to Moville City. On the way, there's this battle against the rival that everyone says is especially difficult and annoying, but I've never really had trouble with them, and it confuses me all the time. Honestly, this random battle against a Pokefan was more annoying. After that, there's a battle against Wally, and he is so weak that it's difficult not to one-shot him no matter what Pokemon you're using. And once you've beaten him, Watson's gym opens up to us. Watson is a pretty unusual gym leader. Depending on your choice of starter and the luck of the draw with your encounters, he's either completely free or one of the hardest gym leaders in the game, possibly the series. He has an impossible Magneton on his team, and there are really only 2 viable counters to that thing available this early on, Marshtomp and Breloom. Every other Pokemon available this early either doesn't have the moveset to deal with it, or takes too much damage from its electric-type moves. Thankfully, I do have one of those counters on my team. All I have to do is get to him.
Fuck! Okay, that's what I get for not paying attention.
Alright, that was completely my own fault. I got impatient while trying to get to Watson, so I started rushing and wasn't paying proper attention. You can actually see me realize I fucked up in real time in the footage. By the way, I'm sorry about the amount of times I've screwed up in these challenges purely by being impatient. In total fairness to myself, I have a full-time occupation. I only have so much time to dedicate to YouTube videos that get 27 views. Watson himself was easy, by the way. Toadette swept. After that embarrassing run of Watson's gym was over, I headed north to begin the mid-game. This is a pretty annoying section of the game because it's very linear on a very non-linear map. The player is basically forced to go halfway around the region, only to listen to a few lines of dialogue, and then double back pretty much the entire way in order to get to the next gym. The one upside is that I get a few ground-type encounters, which will be pretty helpful in the upcoming fight against Flannery. I also get a rock-type in the Lunatone that I catch in Meteor Falls, and... Wait, why did I do that? Meteor Falls is supposed to be the location that I have a chance to catch a Bagon later, and I spent my encounter on a rock-type with a base attack stat of 55. Whatever, Bagon isn't guaranteed later anyway. Now that that weird tangent that the game takes you on for some reason is over with, the roadblock in front of the cable car is gone, and I can finally make my way up to Lava Ridge Town and challenge Flannery... Wait, hold on, what's going on here? Okay, not gonna lie, I honestly completely forgot that there was an encounter with Team Aqua up here. As a result, the team I have on me at the moment is a little more prepared for taking on fire types than it is for taking on water types. I really don't feel like heading all the way back to a town to rearrange my team, so I just soldier on. How hard can it be, I think? They're just gonna have a bunch of Puccinas, Zubats, and Carvanas. They're not too tough. And for a while, it looks like I'm right. I get through the grunt, and Admin Matt barely even taking damage. However, while fighting Archie, I have a bit more trouble. I forgot to level up my Pokémon, and his team have some pretty annoying movesets. I have to switch around a bunch because his Myena won't stop spamming Stand Attack, and Rock Smash doesn't do nearly as much damage as I was expecting. My lack of knowledge about the Hoenn region really came back to bite me there. I forgot that Rock Smash only has 20 power in Gen 3, instead of 40. God, that move sucks. Bolt the Electrike takes down Golbat without any trouble, and for his third Pokemon, I'm expecting a Carvana, but instead an impossibly evolved Sharpedo comes out.
Yes, which I don't think can do much of anything to my team. How the fuck does he have a Sharpedo this early? There's no way that, what the hell is it called? There's no way that Carvana actually evolves that early.
Bosses in these games have unfair Pokemon like this all the time, including the previous boss I faced. I don't know why I was expecting anything different here. I try to attack, but it outspeeds and kills Bolt. Bolt would have evolved if I leveled him up one more time before the battle, so that was easily preventable. I then send in Margaret. She gets it low, but Archie uses Scary Face to lower her speed, and then he heals. I then lose Margaret to a crit crunch.
This shouldn't kill? Of course it crits. God fucking damn it.
Okay, so things here are looking pretty bad, but there was still a way out. I had to play very carefully, but I had a plan that was going to work so long as I didn't make any stupid blunders. You are not going to believe what I pulled off here. No, I'm just kidding, I wiped.
What a great thing to come back to, man. Ugh.
Honestly, I might sound a bit frustrated in the video, but really, I'm pretty glad that attempt ended in a wipe. I didn't deserve to win with how poorly I've been playing. So, time for another catch-up montage, I guess. I ran the RNG for my starter, and get Trico again, this time naming it Geico. Ugh, really? This time I get a decent special attack IV, but a minus special attack nature. Anyway, while going around catching my early game encounters, I decide to also battle a few of the trainers, seeing if I could avoid the money troubles I had on the previous attempt. Unfortunately, I have a bit of trouble with youngster Billy and his Tailo, and I wind up having to sack Shenzi the Puccina. Well, that's not a good sign of things to come for this attempt. My encounters wind up being pretty similar, catching mostly the same species in the same places, and I even wind up using some of the same names, though this time I end up with a Lotad instead of a Wingull. Roxanne is a sweep this time, though Otori the Lombre does wind up taking a hit that would have killed if it crit. I don't know why I stayed in there. I think I saw the X from the Rock Tomb animation and thought she'd use Block, even though she doesn't know it in this game. I get another Tailo, this one named Madge, so Brawly's a sweep once again. My track record of having little trouble with the infamous second rival battle also continues, however, Watson's entire gym goes a lot less smoothly. I hadn't evolved my new Shroomish, Toadette 2, yet, because I didn't want to risk her going over level before Watson. However, with no solid counter, I wind up having to sack Mystery the Dustox to the trainer in the gym with a Magnemite. As for Watson himself, he was nearly a wipe. I didn't really make any misplays, I just got really unlucky with paralysis, and I end up having to sack 2 more Pokemon to his Magneton. In the end, this entire attempt basically rode on Toadette 2 dodging a full paralysis for a turn, which thankfully she manages to this time. I go on the tedious tangent again, this time remembering not to encounter anything in Meteor Falls, and I managed to catch back up to where I was, though I had a few more deaths this time. The rematch against Archie goes very smoothly. Toadette 2 and Gene the Gyarados make quick work of his team. Man, things sure do go a lot better when I'm actually prepared properly. Afterwards, I solve the annoying gym puzzle and make it to Flannery. In Emerald, she's actually a really difficult battle. Overheat is a really powerful move that most Pokemon available at this point that don't resist it will have a pretty hard time surviving. All of her Pokemon know it, and her Torkoal even has a White Herb, so it has one consequence-free use of the move. It normally lowers the user's special attack. She's not quite as difficult in Ruby and Sapphire, having a smaller variety of Pokemon and lacking a White Herb, though she does still have some annoying gimmicks like Attract and Body Slam Paralysis. However, with Jean, as well as Aquafina the Pelipper, I managed to beat her with no real danger. Now that we're through Watson and Flannery, there's something that I want to point out. They were assholes when designing this part of the game. One of the main reasons Watson can be so tough is the lack of counters to his Magneton that are available at that point in the game. You know what would be an excellent counter to his Magneton? Numel. You know when Numel becomes available to catch? Immediately after you've defeated Watson. Pretty much the same story with Flannery. One of the main reasons she can be so tough is the lack of counters to fire types you're given that early. You do have a few water types, but most of them don't have any decent moves at this point. The Surf HM would be nice. You know when you get that? About 10 minutes after you've beaten her. And this last one takes the cake in my opinion, though it does apply more to Emerald than it does to Ruby and Sapphire. Being able to catch more Ground-type Pokemon would be a pretty consistent answer to both of them. In Ruby and Sapphire, you do get Geodude, Numel, and Sandshrew, which is why this complaint doesn't apply as much to those games. In Emerald, however, Sandshrew isn't available this early on, and Geodude and Numel wouldn't really work due to being weak to ground types themselves, because in Emerald, Flannery has her own Numel that she doesn't have in Ruby and Sapphire. Sandshrew, as well as a few other ground types, are catchable, but only in the at first inaccessible desert area of Route 111. Do you know when you gain access to this area? Right after you've beaten Flannery. And I really mean immediately, as you're walking out the door of the gym, the rival walks up and gives you the item that lets you access that area. Sure, after you've already beaten the Rock, Electric, and Fire gyms, now you can have access to all the ground types, when the remaining gyms include the Flying Gym, the Psychic Gym where everything either has Levitate or is also Flying type, and the Water Gym. The only reason I can think of for why they did this is that someone at Game Freak really liked the Mudkip family and wanted as many people as possible to use it, because they are just about the one consistent answer to all of this. Anyway, the battle with Norman happens pretty much right away after you've beaten Flannery. Norman is generally known for being one of the series' harder gym leaders, and is the only Hoenn gym leader who is arguably harder in Ruby and Sapphire than he is in Emerald. Basically, there's this strategy in Pokemon known as overloading, or something like that, where you assemble a full team of Pokemon that use the same or similar strategies. It might seem counterintuitive, like, what if the opponent has a reliable counter to that strategy? You're basically just giving them free kills. But weirdly, it can actually have the total opposite effect. The opponent's counter strat can often be overwhelmed by the sheer number, and then the user can just plow through the rest of the opponent's team. That's pretty much what Norman does in this game. He's got 2 Slacking, plus its pre-evolved form Vigoroth, when the most reliable Slacking counter strats available to the player at this point, like Protect, Dig, or Counter, which is the one I'm planning on using, will only reliably get them through 1 Slacking. The other 2 Pokemon, you pretty much just have to brute force your way through. Thankfully, while some of my Pokemon do take a couple of pretty risky hits, Jean and Toadette 2 managed to get through the first Slacking and the Vigoroth just fine. Now, All I have to do is get Boppet, the Wobbuffet that I picked up in Lava Ridge Town, out there safely. I pivot switch to Aquafina, a Pokemon where I wouldn't mind too much if I wind up having to sack them, but he takes the hit just fine. I then switch in Boppet on the Truant turn, select Counter, and the final slacking essentially takes itself out. If you remember in my last Nuzlocke video, I said that Norman was where I wiped the first time I ever attempted a Nuzlocke, so to get through Deathless this time feels pretty good. Winning not only gives us our 5th badge, it also gives us access to the Facade TM, allowing us to make our Gut Swallow even more powerful. Now, all that stands between us and the late game are a free encounter with Team Aqua, another free battle with the rival, and the 6th gym leader Winona. Oh, and also this exploding coughing. That was a little worrying. But anyway, Winona. She is yet another Hoenn gym leader who can go really bad if you aren't careful, primarily thanks to her Dragon Dance Altaria. Geez, Hoenn has to have the most consistently challenging set of gym leaders in the whole series. Weirdly enough, she can actually be skipped until the Elite Four if you're doing a regular playthrough, but unfortunately with level caps, that's not an option for me. My original plan for her was to set up Weather with Castform, who I'm only just noticing now in editing that I forgot to nickname, which I'd just gotten from the Weather Institute. But when I saw that her Swallow had Double Team, I decided that actually my best course of action was to just nuke that off the face of the earth as fast as I possibly could. I do not want a repeat of that Raichu. I try and activate Guts on Magigan, which, without access to Fly, is an absolute pain in the ass to do right now. But when I finally get back to Winona, it does result in her getting through Winona's first 2 Pokemon with no problem. Though she does take more damage than I'd have liked. I'm pretty sure she got really bad speed IVs. Unfortunately, Skarmory completely walls her, so I instead have to use Bath Toy the Camerupt. When Skarmory gets low on health, I try and preemptively switch into Castform to set up Hail, but realize that that was a pretty stupid play.
If you're wondering why I'm going for Hail instead of Sunny Day, actually, that's a fucking terrible play. What am I doing? I was trying to plan ahead for Altaria, and I just completely forgot that Skarmory was Steel-type.
Castform takes down Skarmory, but now I have to spend a turn setting up Hail to turn back into an Ice-type, meaning Altaria gets a free hit. So, that plan's a bust. My next plan is to use Boppet to reflect damage back. It probably would have worked, except for the fact that I failed to accurately predict her move on the first turn, leaving Boppet without enough health to pull the strategy off. Eventually, I managed to just brute force my way through with Jean. So, into the late game. If there's one thing to expect about the late game of Hoenn, it's a lot of water. Water roots, water Pokemon, water trainers, 7.8 out of 10, too much water. I go around catching my encounters that I'd missed in previous areas.
God damn, fishing is so annoying in this game.
And have another completely free battle against a Team Aqua admin. However, while I'm trying to get the Master Ball, unfortunately I lose Aquafina to a crit Spark from the Electrode. If you're wondering why I switched in, honestly, I was so worried about Explosion that I forgot Electrode was an electric type. Now, on to Tate and Liza. They're pretty tough in Emerald, but in Ruby and Sapphire, I would honestly consider them to be free on the same level as the gym leaders of Kanto. Literally, all you have to do is stack your team with Dark types, which you're damn near guaranteed to have several of at this point, gang up on Solrock immediately, and when the Solrock goes down, your Dark types completely wall Lunatone, whose only attacking move is Psychic. And even if you don't have access to this strategy, it's not like Solrock and Lunatone are amazingly strong Pokemon anyway. Geico and Mommy Shark the Sharpedo easily sweep. There's one more encounter with Team Aqua, and while the grunts and admins are easy as usual, Archie actually gives me some issues. I was using Geico to take on his Myena when, bizarrely, he switches, which the AI almost never does. It should be fine, I'm playing on set mode anyway, but when I switch to Bath Toy to try and take on the Crobat, she gets confused, and then she hits herself. there's still a possibility that I'll need Bath Toy in a later battle, so I end up being forced to sack Mommy Shark to get a safe switch. Madge and Geico manage to finish off his team from there. As for Kyogre, do I even need to talk about it? Of course I just Master Ball it, I'm not dealing with that thing. There's only one gym leader left. Wallace. His puzzle gives me some trouble.
What? I hit up once! I didn't restock on rare candies, at least I know how to do it now.
But Wallace himself is easy. 4 of his Pokemon are easy 1 or 2 hit KOs from Geico, and as for his Milotic, well, I've got a Wobbuffet. I can use one of Milotic's own strategies against it, and there's nothing Wallace can really do. All I have to do is keep using Mirror Coat and...
And even a crit shouldn't kill here. The worst thing that can happen is a freeze. Exactly what I didn't want.
Of course, man! So what should have been a guaranteed path to victory against Wallace gets screwed over by a 10% freeze chance at the worst possible time. I try switching into Jean to finish it off, but it has just enough health to survive, and then it starts spamming Recover. Then Jean gets crit, and I'm forced to switch her out as well. My next plan is to try using Curse with Guzma the Dusclops. That seemed like a solid backup plan. But then he gets confused by a Water Pulse first turn. Did Wallace hack Serene Grace onto his Milotic or something? He fails to get the move off on the one turn he has a safe chance to attack, and I'm out of safe switches, so I'm forced to stay in on a potentially lethal move, this time trying to get confusion off myself. Wallace uses Ice Beam and gets another freeze! Though this time, thankfully, Guzma thaws out first turn and manages to get off Confuse Ray. Now, I still don't have a safe switch, but at least I have a safer one. I send in Toadette 2, Milotic doesn't hit itself, but thankfully goes for Water Pulse instead of Ice Beam, and does hit itself on the second turn, and Toadette 2 finally finishes off the Milotic with a Sky Uppercut. After all that, I'd honestly forgotten that Wallace still had 2 more Pokemon after this, but thankfully they wound up being free. So, that's all 8 gym leaders down, and every potential encounter unlocked. I guess you do also face Wally one more time, but his team includes a Delcatty and a Roselia. He's really not much of a concern, right? Delcatty is a very weak Pokemon. It's time to start prepping an Elite Four team. I already have several definites on the team I've been using. Madge, Jean, and Boppet are coming along, no questions asked. Madge will be able to sweep nearly the entire teams of several members of the Elite Four with the Guts Facade strategy activated. Boppet will be a great failsafe to several ace Pokemon that can otherwise be really difficult to take down. And Jean, well, she's a Gyarados. Geico is also pretty likely. Pokemon that fulfill the same niche as fast grass types are pretty hard to come by. I do also consider Bath Toy. I need something that can use Fire-type moves because Steve and Skarmory walls pretty much everything else I have, but I'm gonna see what my remaining encounters yield before I decide for certain. In Lilycove City, I find a Staryu, and give it the most predictable nickname ever. Starmie is a speedy special attacker with amazing coverage, and is pretty easy to slot into a team, but this particular specimen winds up being a pretty low priority consideration due to its minus special attack nature. In Shoal Cave, I find a Spheal, which I name Kingpin. It evolves into Walrein, a very common Pokemon to use on an Elite Four team in Hoenn. It's not the hardest hitter in the world, but it's really difficult to kill, nearly on the same level as Snorlax. Hence why the one owned by Glacia of the Elite Four frequently gives people so much trouble. This is a strong consideration. Most of the other encounters are pretty unexciting. Some of them I wouldn't even bring to a battle as death fodder. However, in Meteor Falls, I travel all the way to the back room, and I get a Bagon. Well, that's pretty much an instant addition to the team. Why would I ever say no to a pseudo-legendary with Intimidate for an ability? Damn, it sure is great that I didn't waste my encounter here on a random-ass Lunatone. Eventually, I assemble a level 55 team consisting of the following 6 Pokemon. Geico the Sceptile, Madge the Swellow, Jean the Gyarados, Boppet the Wobbuffet, Kingpin the Walrein, and Crescent the Salamence. I triple check to ensure that I'm fully prepared, and I set off into the Elite Four. The Hoenn Elite Four, just like nearly every other aspect of this game, is much harder than its Kanto counterpart. The first member is Sydney, who uses Dark types, and he is the only one who I would say is pretty much free. Even after the Intimidate from Might Yina, Guts Facade strategy easily one-shots nearly his entire team. I switch out from Shiftry because there was a slight chance that it would survive, and then Madge was probably in range to die from a crit extrasensory. The chances of those two things happening on the same turn is probably hundreds to 1, but I've seen the AI get off triple or even quadruple protects, so you never know with this game. I send in Crescent, and she easily finishes him off. The next member is Phoebe, who uses Ghost types. I was expecting a bit more trouble with her, but not as much as I had. I try using Madge again, but unfortunately I can only use Guts, not Facade, against her, because Ghost types are immune to normal type moves. Madge uses Aerial Ace, and her Dusclops uses Curse, and then just barely hangs on, which is annoying. While she heals, I switch Madge out, and then safely switch her back in because this Dusclops' only attacking move is Shadow Punch. But after a Future Sight, burn damage, and Fly missing, I realized that this approach just isn't working. For a while I keep pivoting to different Pokemon trying different strategies, but Dusclops just keeps using Curse or Confuse Ray, and I'm getting really annoyed and a bit concerned. Eventually I send in Kingpin, who I find doesn't take nearly as much damage from Dusclops' moves as my other Pokemon do, so it's relatively safe to stay in. After a few turns, Kingpin finally gets off a Surf and takes down the irritating Dusclops. Kingpin also manages to take down the first Banette, and nearly Sableye too, but then the hail stops and Sableye manages to get in a crit Shadow Ball, which is annoying because I was planning on resting the next turn. I switch into Jean, and realize that Sableye is actually a pretty safe Pokemon to set up on, so I start Dragon Dancing, and the fight goes smoothly from there. Third up is Glacia, and initially she was probably the member I was most worried about. She has the same issue as Norman, where it can be difficult to get through her whole team even if you have a counter to bulky Water-Ice types because she has 3 of them on her team, plus another 2 pure Ice types. The only good fighting type I'd caught on this adventure was also Grass type, so she wouldn't be much help here, and I had a Special Ball, but that would only get me through 1 or 2 Pokemon, not 5. However, all those worries vanished when I realized something. I hadn't even thought about using Madge this battle because she's weak to Ice types, but when I looked into it, it turned out there was nothing to worry about in that regard. She had guaranteed one-shots on nearly Glacia's entire team. Madge takes down both Celios and both Glalie. Now, all I have to do is switch into Boppet, and Mirror Coat Walrein to death.
Ah!
Are you kidding me? No matter, Jean can finish it off, but man, I'm getting some real bad luck with Boppet this game. The fourth and final member of the Elite Four is Drake, who uses Dragon types. My plan is to set up Hail and one-shot his whole team with Blizzard, and for a while it looks like it's working. But eventually the Hail runs out, and I have to stop and set it up again, and during that time, Flygon gets in some free attacks. You see, this is what I mean about a counter sometimes being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. My counter strategy to Drake was working great, but it only works for so long. On one of Flygon's free hits, it gets in a special defense drop with Crunch, which definitely isn't good. I'll probably have to think of a different strategy for the Salamence, but at least I can take out this Flygon.
God damn. Wait, what? It's hailing. How the fuck did Blizzard miss?
Oh dear, my lack of knowledge about the Hoenn games strikes again. Hail doesn't cause Blizzard to bypass accuracy checks in Gen 3. That's something that was added in Gen 4. I guess up to this point I was just getting really lucky with Blizzard accuracy. Now I have to switch Kingpin out of there, and that means that the Hail I pointlessly set up is going to damage me too. I try setting up with Jean, and while she manages to take Flygon down, by the end she doesn't have nearly enough health to even think about taking on the Salamence. My next plan is to try and use Boppet, and while she's able to take a Dragon Claw, it does pretty close to a third. A crit high roll on the next turn could be pretty dicey. Oh hold on, he actually uses Crunch, which I completely forgot he knew. Yeah, a crit of that definitely would have killed. Thankfully that doesn't happen, and Boppet's Mirror Coat finally manages to take someone out. We have now made it to Steven. Now, I've never actually fought Steven before. Wallace replaces him as the champion in Pokemon Emerald, and while you can fight Steven in the post-game, I've never bothered. Nearly everybody seems to consider Steven to be the harder fight. I guess I'm about to find out for myself. I begin the fight leading with Crescent, and immediately get crit. Not a great sign. After Skarmory goes down, he sends in Claydol, and I switch to Geico. He sets up Light Screen, which is annoying, but there's not a lot this thing can do to Geico in the way of damage. I try to bait him into using full restores on his easier Pokemon, but unfortunately, unlike in Fire Red and Leaf Green, in this game the AI actually seems to be a little smarter about that sort of thing. His Cradily comes out next. While looking at Steven's team, I'd pretty much immediately accepted that I was probably not getting through this battle without making a few sacrifices. Geico was either weak to or resisted by nearly every Pokemon on Steven's team after this point, so I decided a safe switch would be a better move than trying to keep Geico alive. Sorry, dude. Crescent then manages to take down Cradily before being finished off herself by Armaldo. I do have to be careful. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary in order to secure a win, but at the same time I shouldn't go crazy with it. Kingpin easily plows through Armaldo and Aggron. I still have 4 Pokemon at perfect health, and Steven is down to his Metagross. Victory is in sight. I set up Hail to get that extra bit of chip damage each turn, but then Steven gets an attack raise from Meteor Mash, which is something I definitely do not want to see. My last resort plan for his Metagross was Boppet Counter, but now a crit would definitely one-shot Boppet. It was already pretty dicey before. I decide the best play is now to sack Kingpin and send in Jean. This does show off my lack of Hoenn knowledge one more time.
Oh, I forgot about fucking Clear Body.
However, she resists Meteor Mash, is immune to Earthquake, and Psychic isn't boosted by the raise in attack. Pretty much what screws us here is if Metagross outspeeds or survives, and then gets a high roll or a crit with Hyper Beam. And if that happens, we're not completely out of the running, but things are looking pretty bad. Oh gee, I wonder what happens next. We outspeed and we KO. No big deal.
Yes! Alright! Had to make a few sacrifices, but we got it.
Alright, to be fair, that was a little lucky. I actually ran some damage calculations later, and if I put everything in correctly, it means that Earthquake only had a 1 in 8 chance of killing there, while if he selected Hyper Beam, it had a nearly 50% chance of killing Jean. I did have Hail going on, so if that did happen, we probably still would have won, but Jean likely wouldn't have been a survivor. That's it though, Pokemon Sapphire is beaten. No post-game quest to do as a bonus round this time, which is probably a good thing, because unlike Blue, Steven kind of decimated my team. So, what's up next? The next Nuzlocke I plan on doing is going to be in Pokemon Diamond, though that probably won't be for a while yet, because I have other non-Nuzlocke, non-Pokemon, and even non-game related videos planned as well. And I want to get to making those too, so be sure to stay tuned. And that's it. I haven't gotten any better at ending videos since last time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.